honestly say that with our show, Tomorrow's TV Tonight, and that was just one show I did, we felt we were the village voice of television, that we had a passion about showcasing the artists of tomorrow tonight on TV. And we sacrificed to make that happen. It's not like we made a studio in the corner of our apartment and we're downloading 10 minutes on YouTube with a reflector lamp. The rent alone on that studio was just about half of what I made a week. So we really put all our efforts into it. I mean, people had full-time jobs that they were putting on the line just to, try to book guests on the side. So we were quite passionate about it, and we were very passionate about turning out like shows that anybody would be proud of. And to do it live, I thought was quite an accomplishment. So I think there's a lot of good things that we did back then, but we're open to the current too and evolving. That's all great, but I believe that we all made our contributions in our way, and there was no M&M for us. We didn't have a free studio back then.
I would like to just say, in kind of like answer to you in defense of the curators, that they were focusing on a certain aspect of public access, and that's why this is called TV Party and all that. I mean, there's all different kinds, like you said, and like we said here, Tony and David and other friends of ours who are here tonight worked on Act Up Live, which possibly represents the other type of shows that you're talking about. I remember a year or two ago, I'm on a beach, I met a guy who was a lawyer, and we started talking, and he said, and I just happened to mention, because he lived in Manhattan, I said, hey, do you watch our show? And of course he never had, but he said, how do you do that? And I led him the way to M&M, and hopefully, if he hasn't done it yet, he's going to do a show about advising people free of charge on legal aspects and things. So we know there are different things, and I think everybody here knows that public access has a much wider range.
Yeah, the show obviously emphasizes the kind of performances and the performative kind of aspect of it. And in that regard, I kind of want to bring in Scott and Gary, if you could talk a bit about your show and putting on performances.
Well, I just do want to say, a lot of hard work goes into doing a show. And I used to get very offended years ago when people would say to me, oh, that looks terrible. I used to work for PBS for Channel 13. I remember after the Butthole Surfer episode, which is a great episode. I thought it was a great episode. Mm-hmm. People in the hall walking, saying, I saw your show last night, and giving me a thumbs down. Now, I took that as a compliment in a way, because it was Channel 13, and they're used to a very state kind of programming. But a lot of work goes into this. The simplest show is actually very complicated to do, and there's a lot of effort put in. And I agree, there's a whole spectrum of programming out there, good and bad, but everybody has to make their own judgment of what's good and bad. And our show was like a variety show. I'll let Gary speak a little bit about that.
I don't have anything yet to say.
Okay, he doesn't have anything to say yet. But it was sort of like the alternative version of American Bandstand, mixed with an influence of Zachary, Soupy Sales, Ernie Kovacs. And it's the kind of show I wanted to see, and I wanted to see myself in the show. And I feel everybody should have a TV show. Why not? It's out there. You just need a camera. I think that's a great thing about YouTube, that, if you want to do something, do it, but just don't criticize somebody else for doing it. And, we had a lot of planning. We originally taped in New York with Mr. Kladnick's studio, and then we had to leave that studio, went to another studio. We wound up taping in Maryland through Jeff Kulik, who did Heavy Metal Parking Lot at his studio. And basically, I don't feel we ever really finished. I'd love to keep doing the show. I'd love to keep being creative. I think my colleagues here are very creative people, and they'd probably love to continue doing shows.
Yeah. And another interesting thing about the shows is how they evolve each show, in the course of its lifetime. Could you talk a bit about how the Scott and Gary show, for example, started out and then changed?
Well, it changed because it started out, I think Gary and I were watching the Grammy Awards one night, and I said, well, this is ridiculous. This is horrible music. And Gary said to me, there's a thing called public access, and we could do our own show. I said, okay, I'll do it. So Gary then spent time volunteering at various shows in public access for about a year.
Yes, I spent about a year volunteering at different shows there, and I don't think what was great was everyone was just doing what they thought television was about. Like John Wallowich had his call-in show. There's a really insane show called Creating Coincidences with this guy who ran the Fashion Motor Gallery in the South Bronx, which was kind of seminal at that time for showing graffiti art and like Keith Haring and stuff like that. Well, I'm just saying those were some of the shows I worked on. And I think that the excitement, the impetus for doing it was just to do something that was really live and to kind of show the energy of what television could be. And we wanted that energy to come off on the screen. And even though I don't think, like you said, a lot of it may have been your style, but I think a lot of these people, they had sort of a concept that was really exciting for them. And for us, it was to kind of bring back sort of this energy, this live energy back to television. And so that was, so my deal was doing the technical stuff and learning how to direct. And Scott sort of knew all about experimental bands that were out there. It was sort of an American bandstand with sort of modern, with experimental bent to it. And then we would just go out and see bands or contact bands that we liked and ask them to be on. And they were like, yeah, cool, we'll be in town at this time. And we would just book time and do it.
And it was very important for us for the bands to play live. We really wanted that live feeling, and that's something I feel, not to say like, it's better back then, but that's sort of that 60s feel, that Soupy Sales feel. It's like, things are just happening, and you're not quite sure what's going on, but there's that energy. And we really felt, let's get the energy across, let's get some cool music on TV. I love the idea of people flipping dials and just coming across, like our show or any of these shows, going, what's that? And we're on the same wavelength as ABC, NBC, and CBS.
I think that it's very important to talk about that particular concept. At the beginning of public access, also we have the invention of this little thing called the remote control. With a remote, you were able to change channels. I will advise my viewers that we should have the changing channel network, because you can watch just maybe 30 seconds each channel and you can have a complete view of what's happening on cable at a particular time. So you have also to understand, like this particular clip presentation was done to be seen at home, and also because it's very low quality, because it was produced in such a minimum budget, was working against that mainstream television. And I think that also public access at that time, like George rightly said, you have the council meetings, they have a community action, was a whole variety of things, and for a lot of reasons it didn't take off the ground because people didn't make the connection between this low-tech and creative or unusual or different approaches to the media. They were just confined to one type of distribution that was commercial television. This opened the door to a new way of seeing television, a new way of doing television that includes this type of shows.
There was a point where I'd say there was like a real sort of viewer community. I may be imagining this, I'm sorry. But around the early 80s to the mid-80s, maybe into the 90s, of people who were watching public access. And, one of the things is, there's something crazy going on, like, what's that guy doing with the iguana? But it might make you say, well, I want to go back to that channel later. And because of the nature of it, you had no idea what was going to happen next. You could look at a title, what did that mean? And you might see something else that was totally, like, whatever. It was art, it was news, it was whatever. It would be there. And I think the crazy stuff was good. In just one way, it drew people to the channels just to say, what are those knuckleheads up to now? Oh, no, it's not a knucklehead. That's interesting. That's very informative. I'm going to watch this for half an hour. So, it's like the good and the bad were there. I just want to point out something, that there's, like, a lot of us are like public access old-timers, but it sounds bad, but there was someone who's been doing public access, I learned, like, even before we were doing it. He was doing it in New Paltz. Harold Hudson Channer is sitting in the front here. And 1971, when did you start?
actually, I think about 69 up there.
Yeah.
In New York.
You know, so and you've been doing a talk show, informative talk show since '69. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, yeah, but it didn't get. Yeah, actually, officially in New York since about '73.
'73.
Yeah.
So there's that. I just wanted to
Public
point.
access is great. It's great.
And Jim, I don't. Was your first show a chess show? You doing chess? That was like the first live show.
We did so much, I can't even remember what the
I
first
think you
one
told me you wanted to do chess on the air with people.
We did
or
chess.
something where you took the questions.
I don't know, but I remember a chess show from way
Yeah, I
back.
remember chess.
People could play chess with somebody on the screen.
The one thing I'd say about Jim's place, which was, easy come, easy go, if you had the money, or sometimes if you didn't, you could have a show. And it's not that we all had something in common. We all had very different shows. And it's not that we even all liked one another, but, we supported one another. And I don't remember it being an environment where we made fun of each other's shows at all. Even though they were completely different, and I might not choose to watch that particular show, I don't recall that we ever disparaged another show.
I think that also another thing that we should point out, that we all came to Access from different disciplines and with different ideas. And the fact that you can have like one show that maybe a talk show, like you just mentioned before, that was good in the context of the other shows, that is worthwhile. And I came from the art world, or working with video, and I should recognize now that it's in our audience that is did the first artist access show. That was Paul Schenkel, and I think that he was the real pioneer of video art on public access, and he was able to use that public access in a way that was impossible to even imagine that would do it in television. And he was going to to all these clubs, videotape the most avant-garde rock groups, and having interviews, and then having for the first time interviews with the major artists at that time that was shown on television. So I think that's very important to point that out. That was unconceivable in those days to have those things. And Paul did it like Basquiat was the first one to do interview with Basquiat, and was as part of his show. Just to have that percentage of incredible shows, it justified the public access. If you are watching television today, that you have in Manhattan like 1,000 channels, percentage-wise, how many shows are great, stimulating? Very, very few. So the percentage-wise, I think in public access we did very well.
Actually, Lisa, I do remember a case where one public access producer did poke fun at other public access producers on the show. Joe Bornstein did it. He poked fun at Interactive Cable, he poked fun at The Bowl Show, he poked fun at Spotlight on TV. I wish I had that reel somewhere. It was buried in the bottom of a mountain of tape I had once years ago. So, we did, there was times when people did poke fun at each other, My problem in particular is like, here I am, a rabbit doing a show on cable, yet cable TV, it was supposed to make rabbit ears obsolete. And I had to hang in there all the time.
Great joke.
This might be a good moment to turn over to questions from the audience about public access. Yes, in the second row,
Yes,
please.
I've been watching public access almost all my life, born and raised in Manhattan. And I remember one time watching the Bowl Show at Will. You once mentioned something, I think you were at a mall up in Natty Wet in upstate New York, and someone recognized the Bowl Show, like you were there, and they mentioned the Bowl Show to you.
Yeah, that frightened me.
Yes.
I didn't know what was going to happen next.
Have any of you had any unique or surprising experiences going out of the New York area and being recognized from your show on New York City Public Access?
Sure.
I the craziest thing is people will come up to me more outside the New York area than in New York. Like in New York, nobody said, hey, that guy.
I once saw you on the street, though,
You know.
back in 1995, and I stopped you, and I still
That frightened me too. But it was more likely I'd be like in San Francisco, and then like, hey, you, the Vol Show. I'm like, what is San Francisco?
Stories like that, how Manhattan Public Access TV has transcended Manhattan, even transcended New York City into other states and areas.
Well, I mean, it was something. I mean, people would go to hotel rooms, and they used to. I mean, they had public access. People, you know, they'd come from out of state, and they were like, "Whoa, what the? You know, this isn't in our neighborhood." You know, in the '80s. I don't know. About
Yeah.
Can I tell a little story here? Our friend David Spaz, who's in the audience right there. You might,
Radio DJ on WFMU.
yes, he was in his band, the Shemps, at the time of this story, and the band toured all the way to Japan. And was it Tokyo? Yeah, they went to Tokyo. They walked into the club, and this couple came up to Dave and said, "Are you from New York?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And the next question they asked him was, "Do you know the Wild Record Collection?" So I mean, here's
So we can't get recognized because this is the only star of the show.
there are several hundred stars actually.
Well, that's still better than me. I hardly get recognized at all, even during the Easter parade.
We should mention, too, that public access was not only in New York, was all over the country. And there were also people doing interesting things in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and the things like now that we are considering main performance, like in the Museum of Modern Art, in the late 70s, La Mamelle, that was an alternative space in San Francisco, was showing those pieces on public access television in San Francisco. So you can see a whole history that is not only in New York public access, but was happening in Chicago, was happening in Atlanta, was happening all over the country.
We used to distribute our show to the cities around the country, Minneapolis, Austin, Texas. But one funny thing I thought was funny was Monterey Peninsula College asked us for a videotape, and we got very excited. And eventually we asked for the tape back, but they said, no, you can't be using this to teach a class in video production. And they're like, really?
An exemplary show. Another question? Let's take one way in the back there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tom Zathian, and I worked with George Stoney at Alternate Media at NYU in 1972, 1973. And I'd just like to amplify, I think George's point deserves a little bit more emphasis, that what public access originally started out as was a back channel, as an input from the community on cable television. Because in the beginning, cable television only went one way, from the top down. The idea of public access was that we're going to open this up and give a voice to the community. In New York, it became mostly entertainment shows. But the work that George did with alternate media all across the country needs to be recognized, giving that information channel to communities who wanted to get a stoplight by a school, and communities who wanted to get a better library, and communities who wanted to solve other kinds of problems. And that this was, in a sense, the birth, what gave public access its substance, the idea of the public having access to cable television. And then, of course, in New York, when you end up here, since it's the entertainment capital, it assumed the entertainment model. But George is very right, and I think everyone needs to be cognizant of the fact that public access started out as a political and a technical revolution, giving the people a way to put information onto what was formerly a one-way distribution system. Right. And all of a sudden now it became two ways.
Yeah, but definitely, yeah, very important point. And one hope of an exhibition like this is to, just generally draw attention to public access. So, maybe more exhibitions be made about it and its many different aspects. Another question from the audience? Yes, you, sir.
Right here. Okay, I have it's actually two questions. The first is for everyone on stage. What do you think of the current state of of Manhattan, New York cable access in light of, now that things are more interactive across the board with YouTube, etc.? Like, has it changed? Has it made it more relevant? Has it sort of diminished its importance? The second question is specifically for Snuffles. Is that the only bear? Has there been any accidents where maybe like has it gotten dirty? Has there, how do you take care of the bear? I mean, just stuff like that. But also, what do you also think of YouTube?
If you need a lawyer before you answer this question, in a sense.
Well, okay, he is the bear that has appeared on every single episode of the show. We've had him since 1988, bought him in Iceland, and I thought he was so unique, and then saw him in every toy shop and card shop in New York when I came back. However, we do have a standby, and he's never gone on, but he kind of like sits on the shelf right next to Snuffles. And Snuffles has gotten very dirty over the years, and I was telling everyone earlier this evening how we bought this product called, he's a gunned bear, by the way, called Bubble Gunned, where you spray it on him and try and get him clean, and it kind of doesn't really work that well, and then you have to brush him to try and get the fur back up the right way. And then FAO Schwartz had a brand of teddy bear cleaning stuff that also didn't work all that well. So today is what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and Rapid T. Rabbit kind of told us about this at one point. We powder him, and Rapid, give us the makeup call.
The what?
Well, when we were on your show, you run makeup.
Makeup!
There we go. So
I can confirm, white fur is always hard to keep clean.
And
it really is.
It's a good universal truth to end on, I think.
I'd like to answer that other question,
yes.
about whether public access is still relevant because there's YouTube or whatever like that. That's not TV. YouTube and these clip things that you can get on the internet, that's really not television. Television is something that you don't necessarily or even searching for. I mean, you have to search clips and things like that when you're on a computer and you think, well, do I want to see this? Do I want to see that? When you're watching TV, you just flip in channels and you may come across so many things that you don't really care to see, but you give it a chance anyway, and then you find that you're watching again next week and the week after that and the week after that. And I think the biggest difference, I think, and I think the most important thing about cable access is it isn't corporate. It isn't business driven. It isn't trying to sell you anything, except, in our case, fun.
I'd like to add to that, too, because I actually have a unique point of view of both sides, both from the public access viewer side and from the Manhattan cable TV side. One thing about, with the franchises that went into effect as of the early 1990s, creating MNN, BCAT, Bronstedt, SI Community, even though, as he said, public access TV is not corporate, the rules have gotten more corporate. It's certainly hard to get on public access. You have more paperwork, red tape, hoops to jump through, and it's often very hard to get onto public access, let alone stay to get on public access. It was a lot better back in the 80s when, you go up to Jim Claddick and, request a time slot, whatever was available. And back in those days when people like Marjorie Thurston ran the public access department and programming at Manhattan Cable, he was the only person you had to talk to. It was like, it felt like small town television. And, you really don't have that anymore. I mean, the world has gotten so much corporate nowadays in terms of its level of indifference. It's more distancing between you and your target of getting a show on. So it's that's why the 80s was the golden age of public access TV. I'm sad to observe that may never come again. And at the same time, the internet is not really a substitute or replacement for public access TV. One of the beautiful things about public access TV, even with digital cable technology nowadays, is that your show is on the digital program guide right along all the other, quote, mainstream shows on cable. So You know, you can like scroll through the shows and the public access channel would be there and your show would be there too. I thought it was kind of funny how when Rapid Graphic was originally put on the digital programming guide at Time Warner Cable, I was always listed for some strange reason as public affairs. And I kept thinking, you know, they probably had that wrong. Maybe they meant puppet affairs. You know, you realize if you watch my show, most of the time I look smaller. That's because everything looks smaller on TV, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's the internet, you know, it may be a fad, but it can never really truly replace public access.
I'd like to say that I owe Access a real debt because when I started in Access, I was singing in a Japanese piano bar with Cyndi Lauper in Japanese, and I had no direction whatsoever. And I started having to think about producing my own show and working up. First, I'm a correspondent, then I have to get a guest, then I'm getting a bigger guest. Then I want more. It's sort of the nature of the human being, that insatiable quality that drives us. And because of all of that and having to create these shows under short term, I believe when I finally made that transition to broadcast, I came with gifts that other people didn't have. You know, I came with that scavenger thinking that you can only get an Access. I came with the ability to work a trade deal and to negotiate, and you know, and really be a bottom feeder and trying to produce a quality product. So for me, it was a treasure, and it opened a door for me so that now I do have a direction. I've had opportunity.
Is anybody representing Manhattan Neighborhood Network who could respond to your accusations that it's getting harder to get on shows? Well, anybody here who can speak for that?
We can.
Dan Coughlin?
Dan here?
I don't think so.
Well, we have to wrap up, but we're going to continue the discussion in the cafe. So I just want to invite everyone to. We actually have to wrap up in the theater, but we encourage you to ask the questions of our guests in the cafe. And again, I want to thank everyone. Okay, and as everyone leaves, we're just going to be rolling credits.
Children singing